Hello and welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. The Korean economy recorded its highest growth rate since the second quarter of 2010 in the July to September period, thanks in part to a strong rebound in domestic consumption and the government's supplementary budget. The pre-session for another round of family reunions begins, this time North Korean applicants meeting South Koreans with hometowns across the border. Lawmakers grilled presidential office officials on a number of issues, including the proposed changes to history textbooks and failure to obtain the transfer of key fighter jet technologies from the U.S. Let's start on a high note. Some welcome news for the Korean economy. The central bank says Korea's third quarter GDP growth hit a 5-year high as domestic demand offset sluggish exports. Shin Se-min takes a closer look at whether the positive upswing can continue.
The Korean economy grew 1.2% on quarter in the July to September period. That's the highest growth rate since the second quarter of 2010 and the first time in 6 quarters for the rate to top 1%. On year, the country's gross domestic product grew 2.6%. The Bank of Korea credited a solid rebound in domestic consumption and a pickup in government spending for the overall growth.
Government's efforts to reinvigorate spending, like cutting consumption tax and a fiscal stimulus package, including an extra budget plan, had a positive effect on the third quarter figures.
And that trend is likely to continue, at least until the end of this year.
With the consumption tax cut scheduled to last until the end of this year, added with the government's supplementary budget, the economy will likely maintain its 1% growth throughout the fourth quarter.
And that's without the help of the country's outbound shipments. Exports, making up half the country's economy, were down 0.2% during the third quarter due to sluggish global demand coupled with a slowdown in China. The central bank said the strong comeback in the third quarter is a sign that the economy is on a recovery track. But experts remain concerned as the current pace of growth cannot be sustained by domestic demand alone, highlighting the need for improved exports. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Despite suffering record losses this year, Korean shipbuilders secured the top 5 spots as the world's largest by-order backlog. According to global researcher Clarkson Research Services, Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering had the largest order backlog of 8.5 million compensated gross tons at the end of September, maintaining its #1 position for 11 consecutive months. Daewoo Shipbuilding was followed by local rivals Hyundai Heavy Industries, Samsung Heavy Industries, and other Hyundai affiliates. Korean shipbuilders suffered huge losses this year, mainly due to increased costs from the delivery of low-priced ships and a delay in the construction of offshore facilities. They are closely followed by Chinese and Japanese rivals that outpaced Korean shipyards in terms of new orders in the third quarter. The Korean stock index inched up along with other Asian stock markets. The driving force behind this trend, the European Central Bank remarks that suggest more stimulus measures. Kim Ji-yeon tells us more.
Asian stock markets rallied Friday on expectations of more stimulus measures from the European Central Bank. Korea's benchmark Kospi jumped 1% from the previous day, rising above the 2,050 level during midday trading, a 3-month high to close at 2,040. Hong Kong's Hang Seng China Enterprises Index increased 1.2%, while Japan's benchmark Topix Index climbed nearly 2%. Markets are reacting to remarks made by ECB President Mario Draghi in a monetary policy meeting held in Malta on Thursday. He said the central bank would examine its €60 billion a month asset purchase program in December, as well as an interest rate cut.
The risk to the euro area growth outlook remain on the downside, reflecting in particular the heightened uncertainties regarding developments in emerging market economies, which have the potential to further weigh on global growth and foreign demand for euro area exports.
The ECB move comes as central banks in Japan and the United States both consider monetary policy next week. Seoul-based KB Investment and Securities Company projects the U.S. Federal Reserve to raise its key interest rate in December, while offering just a 6% chance of an increase next week.
Draghi's statement boosts confidence among investors and markets that the central bank will be able to keep its vow to continue its quantitative easing policy through September next year.
The analyst added that it'll be too early to predict if global markets will turn to riskier assets due to the volatility of emerging markets. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Preparations have begun for the second round of family reunions between South and North Koreans separated by the Korean War more than 6 decades ago. Our Kwon So-ah is standing by in Sokcho, the meeting place for the families from the South. So-ah, the South Korean families have met at the same location as earlier this week, but what differentiates the second round from the first one?
Daniel, as you said, the location, but also the process of the South Koreans readying themselves for the reunions that begin tomorrow is identical to the process that began for the first round on Monday. But in the first round, it was the North Koreans that applied for meeting their South Korean family members. But this time, it's the other way around. Now, as most participants' hometowns are in the north this time, organizers are saying the atmosphere could be somewhat different from the last meeting, even more emotional. Now, in total, 255 South Koreans from 90 families are expected to meet with 188 North Koreans. Now, tomorrow through Monday, the families from the two Koreas will meet on the North Korean side at the Mount Kumgang Resort for group and private meetings lasting a total of 12 hours. Daniel?
Wow, less than 24 hours, the people are going to go through an emotional, bittersweet roller coaster ride. As of right now, so what kind of mood are the families in?
Well, let's let them speak for themselves.
좀 아무래도 뭐라 그럴까 한쪽으로는 뭐 기쁘고 또 만나면 어떻게 돼가는지 그걸 모르니까 그때 지내봐야지. 지금 사는 지 어딘지 전에 있던 대로 사는지 딴 데서 사는지 그 물어봐야지. 뭘 하고 있는지.
아유, 기분이 좋죠. 어머니 소원을 이루어드린 거예요. 어머니가 생전에 동생을 만나고 싶어서 굉장히 애타게 했어요. 생사를 몰라서. 근데 어머니가 가시다가 나 죽어도 소원이 없대.
먼저서 반가워서 이름 부르고 그러겠죠.
안아드리고.
사는 길이 맞느냐 그런 생각이 들어요. 너무 꿈에도 보지 못한 동생이니까.
Now, as you just heard, the excitement is in the air. But for some families, the meeting just seems so surreal, actually. I talked to one of the members, a woman in her 90s, who said that she's going to meet her son tomorrow, but she's only going to believe that this is really happening once she hears her son saying out his father's name. Now, more on that story in our later newscast. Now, this has been Kwon So-ah reporting live at the Hanwha Resort in Sokcho.
Okay, thank you so much for the report. So, well, staying on the subject of family reunions, we are joined by our Unification Ministry correspondent Song Ji-sun in the studio. She was at the Mount Kumgang Resort in North Korea for 3 days during the first round of reunions. Glad to have you back, Ji-sun.
It's good to be home, sweet home.
Well, it's been a very emotionally charged event. It was, of course, happy, excitement for most people, but personally, I felt a lot of frustration and anger at the fact that this is the reality we are faced with. Hopefully something will change, but of course, it was different being there in person. Tell us what it was like.
Well, we could call it a success because, first of all participants from the South and the North have returned home safe and sound for the first round of reunions, which took place as scheduled. Now, out of those 90-some tables, there's not a single family that you can pass by without shedding tears. families were saying they didn't know it was going to take this long for 65 years to meet each other again, with many of them already having held memorial services, thinking their beloved ones had passed away long ago. Now, although the sessions were extended by an hour from the previous reunions, it cannot be enough for them. Many of them wish they could at least spend a night together, but both sides are restricted at the reunion venue at Mount Kumgang's tourism complex. Now, for the second round, the South Korean families will only enter the venue after their North Korean families are fully seated and ready to greet them at the tables.
Well, it seemed like so far so good. Things seem to run quite smoothly. The organizers are doing a great job. But were there any interesting anecdotes, disturbing or interesting anecdotes you'd like to share with us?
Well, there are several episodes behind the scenes. For example, for the first round, upon crossing the border on Tuesday, North Korean officials screened all laptop computers of us South Korean journalists and tablet PCs of the participating families. Now, transporting video footage shot by broadcast journalists was also delayed as North's border office stopped the delegation on the first day. Now, we're hoping that doesn't happen this time around, but besides those little interruptions, the event proceeded without big issue. Participants from the two sides hope that the reunions be held on a regular basis, and North Korean officials I've talked to on the scene also expressed high hopes of resuming the tour programs at Mount Kumgang.
Well, considering this is North Korea, the hermit kingdom of the world, I think it was okay considering their over-the-top response this time around. Speaking of which, how was the event venue? It hasn't been serving its intended purpose for some time now.
Right, there are facilities unused for quite a long time as the tour program halted in 2008 when a South Korean tourist was shot down by North Korean soldiers, and there were some concerns prior to the reunion. But thanks to repair and maintenance efforts put by a Unification Ministry of South Korea to restore the venue unused for 7 years, there were no particular inconveniences, although there was a brief short blackout at the press center on the last day in the first reunion. Now, South Korea's Unification Ministry has also dispatched fire trucks and ambulances to guarantee the safety of our nationals and the North Korean families taking part, and they were all standing by for any need or any situation that might happen.
Well, thank you so much for making time for us in the studio and being back here safe and sound. And thank you for your insights and sharing the personal experiences you had with the reunion event.
Right, I will be updating and following up with the second round as well. Thank you.
We look forward to it. Moving on to other stories, South Korea on Friday called for dialogue with North Korea on nuclear issues as Seoul is ramping up efforts to play a more active role in dealing with Pyongyang's nuclear program. Hwang Jun-guk, Seoul's top nuclear envoy, said he was ready to meet with his Pyongyang counterpart and reach common ground to resolve the nuclear issue. The reclusive regime previously struck a deal to denuclearize in return for foreign aid, but the six-party talks involving South Korea, China, Japan, Russia, and the U.S. have been stalled for the past 7 years. The heated debate continues at the National Assembly today over the government's recent decision to reintroduce complete state control over history textbooks in the nation's secondary schools. Park Ji-won has more on this ongoing controversy.
As the presidential office of Chung Wa-dae underwent its annual parliamentary audit on Friday, lawmakers grilled officials from the top office over various matters that have been the center of political strife. The government's recent decision to reintroduce a state-issued history textbook for the nation's middle and high school students took the center stage of the session. Presidential Chief of Staff Lee Byung-gi dispelled the accusations from some lawmakers that the decision mirrored President Park Geun-hye's strong willingness to redirect the nation's history education, citing that the Education Ministry took the lead in the decision and that the presidential office did not exert direct influence on the matter.
Regarding the history textbook issue, I'm aware of meetings between the ruling party and the government, but the presidential office has never given any direct guidelines to the Education Ministry regarding the matter.
Lawmakers also questioned the presidential officials on Seoul's failure to obtain 4 core technology transfers from the U.S., crucial to the development of its indigenous fighter jet program codenamed KFX. One of the key points of contention surrounds whether the Korean government was aware of any potential issues with technology transfers when it decided on Lockheed Martin for the project. But Kim Kwan-jin, chief of the National Security Office, argued that the 4 technologies are not essential to the $16 billion KFX project.
We can develop the 4 technologies on our own. It is untrue that we need the technology transfer to proceed with the fighter jet program.
Some are demanding that the chief presidential security advisor, who served as defense minister at the time of the request, assume full responsibility for the matter. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
North Korea's artillery threats will be effectively countered by the United States Forces Korea's 2nd Infantry Division despite its relocation next year. Connie Kim fills us in on how the additional rotational rocket battalion and South Korea's well-equipped infrastructure will help in such efforts.
The United States Forces Korea's 2nd Army Infantry Division will have no issues with countering North Korea's artillery threats. Commanding General Theodore Martin made the remarks when asked about relocating the unit to Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi-do Province, 70 kilometers southeast from its current location. An additional rotational rocket battalion was added to the unit early this year to better buffer against North Korea's long-range rocket threats, boosting its combat capability.
So the rotational battalion, which was just added to the division structure, gives us increased capability both in M270A1 rocket launchers, but also in the ability of their radars to detect incoming missiles. I am very well provided in what we call precision-guided munitions.
Martin also reassured the relocation will not affect the unit's training capabilities, as equipment will be transferred by rail to current training areas.
It does not matter where I am based because of the wonderful infrastructure that the Republic of Korea has that allows me to rapidly move north and south by rail or by road.
Out of some 28,500 American troops stationed in South Korea, about 12,000 troops are deployed to the U.S. 2nd Army Infantry Division. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
That's it from us for now. Thank you for watching.